Well, good afternoon and welcome to our Insurance Summit session titled Revolutionize Your Regulatory Review with SERFF Modernized. As you have been entering into the session, you'll notice that your audio has been muted, but you can, however, still ask questions in the chat, and we encourage you to do that. And at the end, you'll be able to raise your hand or unmute yourself to be able to ask those questions as well. You'll notice on the side that Slido has popped up. This is our way of ensuring that attendees are in the session. So that will pop up a few times throughout the session. So we encourage you to please go over there to be able to answer those Slido questions. So at this time, we're going to go ahead and enable the session for our speaker, Lauren Vandal. She is a product owner in the Information Technology Group at the NEIC. Lauren has been with the NEIC for 6 years and is responsible for leading internal and external requirement discovery sessions, collaborating with UI and UX designers, and communicating business requirements for the development team. She is currently a product owner for the SERFF Modernization project. So Lauren, we'll go ahead and turn it over to you so you can share this exciting news about SERFF Modernized.
Awesome, thanks Renee. Hello everyone, excited to be here to talk to you about the SERFF Modernization project. Today I'm planning to go over give a bit of a project overview on the status of the project, talk about our early adopter pivot, and then the hot topic right now is AI, so how we're planning on using AI in SERFF, and then finishing up with some outreach and communication information. So to give a bit of an overview on SERFF, if you've seen one of our presentations, you may have seen this slide before. When we decided to think about a modernization effort for SERFF, we did an initial business and technical assessment, and that assessment ended. We determined that yes, we did want to do a modernization effort, and the reasons for that effort were outlined here in these 3 drivers for change. A lot of it we found was around operational efficiency. When we talked to users about the version of SERFF that you're using today, a lot of our users said that what SERFF did, it did well. But with the increase in complexity and innovation in this space, there really needed to be some more improved capabilities and tools in SERFF to help with some of that complexity, and really wanted to make the system a bit more efficient, less manual. We like to say, letting the knowledge workers do the knowledge work, as we wanted to make some changes for that effort. Also, the underlying technology of SERFF hasn't had an upgrade in quite some time, and so it would have been difficult for us to build these new tools and capabilities on top of the existing architecture, and so that needed an upgrade as well. When we talk about improvements to SERFF modernization, here are just a few of them that are focused on our regulator users. To start, just did want to highlight that we are giving tools to our industry users as well to help them improve compliance. One of them I'll briefly touch on is our pre-submission check. This is a check they'll be able to run on their filings before they're submitted that will give them warnings and errors to help guide them and hopefully help them submit more compliant filings. And I'll talk a bit more about the pre-submission check when we get to the AI section. We're also building in business rules and fee calculations into the system. One of the things that we noticed in the platform is that, particularly on a filing in like the general information tab, there are a lot of fields that have rules for them. Take, for example, the effective date. You may have a rule about how many days out the effective date has to be. That rule is probably in your general instructions, but it means that today a filer needs to read those general instructions, interpret those correctly, and then put the right date on the filing. There's a lot of room for manual error in that process, and that's something that the system should be able to validate for you. So we've started to build in these business rules configurations where you will be able to configure a rule. Say, for example, if your effective date has to be at least 60 days out, then you'll be able to set that rule, and then when the filer is completing their draft filing, if they tried to set the effective date to only 45 days out, then the system will give them an error and tell them that they can't submit the filing like that. So really trying to help our filers submit more compliant filings, have to do less of that manual checking of rules. And so there are less, early issues that are reported and changes needing to be made. In kind of a similar space, we know that it's been requested for quite some time for automatic fee calculations. We've started building that into the system and we'll continue to build that out. Our goal for the first round of automatic fee calculation is 80% coverage. So that works very similarly to the business rules configuration. There'll be a place where you can configure your rules, or we can help you do that. And then the filers will be able to calculate, those fees will be automatically calculated, hopefully helping them get those correct. Now, there may be cases where the rule is very complicated and so we can't configure it right away, or there may be scenarios where a particular filer falls into an exemption and they need to adjust that fee. So there are abilities for the filer to self-calculate or override a fee and then provide explanations for those so that you can understand the reasoning of why they may have changed the fee. But hoping, again, to help those filings be more compliant, those fees be more correct when they come in. We want the platform to be very customizable, and we've started with the dashboard. So the dashboard is the kind of the landing page where when you first open the application, and there is a filing section of that dashboard. That filing section has a couple of customizations. The first is just filters on all of those columns face up, so you can filter down to the filings that you need to look for, but also column customization, which we know has been asked for quite some time. So you'll be able to select which columns you want to display, because we know that not all users need all the same columns, just depending on their roles. So you'll be able to customize which columns, which data pieces display for those filings in those filing list view. Now, the new platform on SERFF is built on a low-code tool called Appian. It's Appian if you want to look it up. And part of Appian has the low-code tool. There are kind of out-of-the-box modules that we can implement, and one of them that we have is a task management module. It's a little self-explanatory. The task management piece has tasks that create like a to-do list. The tasks have an assignee, they have a due date, a priority. So it really creates a good inventory of the outstanding work. And what's great about the task management module is that tasks can be recreated in a couple of different ways. The first is by actions taken into the system. So an example of a task that we have already implemented for our compact users is that when a filer receives what in legacy would have been an objection letter, that then creates a task for them that they have outstanding work and they have issues on a filing that they need to look at. So we have a few different tasks that are created based on actions taken in the system, but tasks can also be created ad hoc, manually created tasks. And that can be a really good way to collaborate with your coworkers or set a reminder for yourself for work that you need to do. So we're hoping that the task is a way that we've increased collaboration and also helping you kind of keep track of all of your work in one place. We have made some significant changes to the review workflow in SERFF. I just want to highlight a couple of those changes today. The first is a terminology change. So in legacy SERFF today, you have objections and objection letters. That terminology has changed to now you have compliance issues and compliance reports. So if you hear that new terminology, it's compliance issue equals objection, compliance report equals objection letter. The other change that we've made with our compliance issues is that today in SERFF, if you're creating an objection and you want to associate that objection with a specific item on a filing, the only options that you have are the schedule items. In the new platform, you can associate a compliance issue to almost every element on the filing. So you can associate a compliance issue to any of the general information fields, to the filing fees, as well as any of the supporting documents. So giving you much more flexibility to be more granular in those compliance issues to hopefully help both you and the filer understand, what that compliance issue is related to help that communication. On the filer side, we have combined all of the ways that they make a change to a filing post-submission. So today they have amendment letters, response letters, post-submission updates, etc. we've combined all of those into one amendment workflow. So that will help them kind of learn. We heard that there was a bit of a learning curve. It was sometimes hard for new users to learn all the different methods of changing things on a filing, and then tracking all of those changes between those different kind of avenues of change. So combining all of those into one amendment workflow hopefully helps streamline that learning process, but also keeps all of those changes in context. There are other changes to that workflow, but there's just a couple that I wanted to highlight today. And then the last kind of key feature that I want to highlight is our self-service user management. We get thousands of user management requests into the service desk every year. And not only is that a load on our service desk, but it's also, each one of those requests has a turnover time. So if you have a new user that you want to onboard into SERFF, or a user that needs to be deactivated, that you have to submit that request, and then that may take a day, a couple of days to get turned around. So we really wanted to update our user management piece to where if you are a user admin, if you are somebody that has that role, you are able to add users, deactivate users, change their roles, and you don't have to submit a ticket to the service desk and have that turnaround time. It's a little bit more efficient that way. So now you have a bit of an overview of the project. I want to give kind of an update of where we are with the project. So these are our major project milestones. I mentioned that initial business and technical assessment of SERFF that was completed in May of 2020. That's when we decided we needed a modernization effort. The RFP for the initial pilot phase was issued in November of that year, 2020. Then we officially started the modernization initiative in March of 2022. And then in March of this year, we had our first release to production for the compact. So that was our compact filings, compact filers, the compact staff, and the NAAC staff that supports them in SERFF. There was a lot that happened between those dates. For example, we also made some changes to legacy. We made some improvements to the filing search, the advanced filing search, and then we also introduced some new reporting tools with the introduction of Tableau dashboards. So a lot happened in between these larger dates, but these are our major project milestones. And this is what we've been focused on since that initial launch for the compact filing. We have received a ton of great feedback from our users that are now in the platform, using it on a day-to-day basis. And so we have been taking that feedback and making enhancements, making UI tweaks, fixing defects to really improve the usability and be responsive to their needs. In that same vein, we've also been heavily focused on providing customer support to those users. And we are very proud about the level of support that we've been able to provide. We have a team of staff that are monitoring our email box and tickets, and don't know how many times that we've seen, somebody emails in, they're having some trouble with the filing, they have a question, and the response is, when are you available? Let's get on a call. You can share your screen, show me what you're seeing. Let's walk through it. And we've been able to provide some, sometimes that's a training thing, because this is a big change. And so we've been able to walk a user through a new workflow that they weren't as familiar with, or that we've been able to identify a defect and get that communicated to the development team. But really happy with the level of kind of white glove user support that we've been able to provide post-launch. And then finally, we've been addressing performance. Some of you may remember that this initial release was supposed to go to production in November of last year, but we delayed that release. And one of the reasons was because we weren't happy with the performance of the application. So we made some changes before release. And then after release, the performance still hasn't been where we want it to be. That's been a lot of the feedback we've received from our users. And so we've just finished up a period where we have really focused on performance. And we've been able to cut a lot of those performance times in half. So still something that we're working on, but we are happy with the effort and the time that we've spent on that. So what comes next is kind of what everybody wants to know. And now that we have the compact and their filers out into the system, Some of you may remember that the next phase of the project was originally going to be the life annuity and credit business. And we learned a lot through the compact rollout. And one of the things that we learned is that going from the single regulator of the compact and their fairly limited user base and filing volume to then the 53 jurisdictions that use SERFF for life annuity and credit and all of those filers was maybe not a great idea and was probably not going to set us up for success. And so we pivoted to more of an early adopter model. This comes from the product adoption curve, which if you're familiar with that curve, starts with an initial innovator user. For us, that was the compact. And then the next group are the early adopters, which is a slightly larger but still small group of early users. So for us, our early adopter phase, these 10 states will be moving into production. Now, not all of these states will be moving all of their business during the early adopter phase. Some are, but some are only moving P&C or only moving life and health. But at least one state instance from all of these states will be moving over to SERFF, the Modernized platform, as part of the early adopter phase. To give a bit more context as to why we decided to do the pivot, the first concern we had was service quality. Again, I mentioned we were so proud of the level of customer support and service we've been able to provide for our users in the new platform that we were really worried that having such a major jump from the kind of the limited usage of the compact and the compact filings to then all of the life annuity and credit business, we wouldn't be able to provide that same level of support. We also found it very valuable to be able to work very closely one-on-one with the compact to understand their business rules, their business needs, to get them ready, but also make sure that we were building the system in a way that would work. And so, again, we were worried that if we went from the one regulator in the compact to then all 53 jurisdictions that use SERFF, we wouldn't be able to provide that same level of one-on-one communication and working with them. So limiting that to just these first 10 states really allows us to have that one-on-one interaction. Also, the migration complexity was another concern. That is something we are very proud about the compact release, is that the migration went very smoothly. We've had really no reports of any issues, migration issues, from the compact. And one of the reasons for that is that, again, we were able to work very closely with them, look at their data that was getting migrated over, and identify anomalies, work with them on how we wanted to handle that, and make that migration process very smooth. The compact's data in SERFF is relatively recent or new, so they didn't have as many anomalies to kind of work through. But because the states have been in SERFF for much longer, the further and further back you get with that data, the weirder it starts to look. And we were worried that, again, if we went all 53 jurisdictions at one time, we wouldn't be able to give the level of detail and care to the migration for every one of those states to be able to make sure we are accounting for all of those anomalies, handling those correctly. And we really want the migration to be successful because that migrated data is very important to move over and be correct. The next consideration was feature richness. So one of the reasons why these 10 states were the 10 states that were chosen was because of how those state instances are configured in the legacy system, and particularly the features that they use and that they don't use. So these states have a more limited, what we refer to as MVP, minimum viable product, which is the features that they definitely need before they transition over to the new platform. If we were to move all of life annuity and credit over at the same time, then we have to meet the MVP of all of the jurisdictions, meaning that everybody would be waiting for the couple of states that use state paper filings or state data retention. So limiting to this group allows us to really focus on that limited list of features that these 10 states need, but it also allows us to move more quickly to develop that smaller list of features, get them out to production, get feedback, and then kind of build on that base with other features that other states need. And then finally, learning and refinement. We learned a ton with the compact release, and we've been able to refine our rollout process, our training process, based on that learning. We want to be able to continue to do that to make the process more smooth, better for users, and pivoting to the smaller group allows us to do that. So when we start talking about the next phase, the next question we always get is, what's the timeline? When is it coming? And the truth is that we don't really know yet. And part of the reason for that is because these early adopter states will be able to have input in when their transition date. It will very much be a kind of a partnership, a decision made between the NAIC staff and the state. So as we're getting development finished, as they're testing and training, the states are getting more comfortable. They'll decide, come to a point where they're ready to go over, and then we'll set a date. We have committed that transition date will give at least 30 days notice for our users. So the regulators and the affected filers as well will have at least 30 days notice. But because this is a decision that each state will get to make, that means that the early adopter states will most likely have different transition dates because they will be ready at different times. Another consideration and a concern that we hear is that because of this transition to early adopters, it means that more users will be operating in both systems for a time, kind of the coexistence is how we've been referring to it. We understand that concern, and so we have, as part of this phase, we will be adding messaging and tools to both systems to help guide users to know what should be done in each system. And I'll be explaining some of the changes to legacy that we know are coming in the next slide. And then, what comes next after the early adopters? And for that, the early adopters will really kind of inform those steps. How those first few early adopter states go will really help us kind of get a better idea of timeline for the rest of the early adopters and kind of the phases going forward. We also are still considering strategy of what comes next after the early adopters. If we're continuing to follow that product adoption curve, the next group would be what's called the early majority, which would be another set of 20 to 25 states probably. So we're thinking about that. We're also thinking about kind of a one out, one in model where as one early adopter state kind of gets transitioned and out into production, we bring in another state and start talking to them about their business needs and their requirements, start kind of working them through the process. So definitely still considering kind of plans for the roadmap, but how those first few early adopters will help determine those steps and that timeline. I mentioned changes to help ease that kind of coexistence period. These are 3 changes that we know of that are going to be made in legacy. The first is for our filers. There will be messaging in the filing wizard in legacy to let them know which state instances, which business types have moved over to the SERFF Appian, the new platform, so that it's clear to them, what they can still do in the filing wizard in legacy versus what they need to go to the new platform to do. The next change is a continuation on what we did for compact filings. So once a filing has been migrated over, it becomes completely read-only. So you can still view it, but you can't make any changes. And then there is a message banner on that filing that lets them know that this is a filing that was migrated over. That's why there's that functionality limitation. That currently exists on all of the compact filings in the legacy system that went into effect when those filings were migrated over. And we will do that same messaging and limitation on state filings that are part of these early adopter transitions. And then with reporting, you will still be able to run reports in legacy that include filings that were initiated in legacy. So even if they were migrated over, they'll still be included in your reports that are run in legacy, but the kind of content of those reports related to those filings will be limited to kind of where they ended where those filings ended in legacy before the migration. So once a filing is migrated over, if it's something that was in progress, work continues to happen in the new platform, but those changes don't get then transferred back over to legacy to update that filing in legacy. That filing in legacy is essentially frozen where it kind of ended before the migration. So you'll need to take that into account in the reporting, but those filings will still show up in those reports. We know that AI. Oh,
sorry, Lauren, before you move on, I just noticed that there is a question in chat about how we chose the early adopters. Do you want to talk a little bit about that?
Sure. I'll mention a couple things, and then if I've forgotten anything, you can jump in.
All right.
So I mentioned that one of the big reasons why we chose the states that we did is because of how they were configured. So how their configurations were on their state instance. A lot of that was also kind of has some carryover to like what the features they use. So and what features they don't use, because again, we kind of wanted to limit that scope to be able to develop faster, get those state filings out, and get those states transitioned over. And then another reason that we chose these states is how engaged they've been in the project so far. Every state has a state liaison, and we've done communication activities. So we wanted to choose some states that were a little bit more engaged for this first go around, because it is still a bit experimental, kind of coming from that innovators to that early adopters. Did I miss anything, Bridget?
No, you did great. I would just add on that it was definitely a very deliberate kind of like thought through process. So certainly not drawing names from a hat. We really spent a lot of time trying to figure out what would be the best course of action in choosing these states.
Yes, definitely. All right, so it's everybody's favorite topic right now is AI. And so we want to talk a bit about the AI in SERFF. And I want to focus today on a tool that we are building to help AI for form review. So this is something we built a proof of concept of, and we debuted this proof of concept at the early adopters workshop in June. Part of that workshop was a hands-on activity where we broke up those early adopters into small groups. They were able to get into this AI tool, and what this AI tool solution is meant to do is you will build in your rules like from your checklist. So you've got most states have checklists that they use to help with their reviews for different filings. So you build your rules in, and then the AI helps learn to evaluate those rules and if the filing content passes or fails. So as part of this hands-on activity, again, we broke those early adopters into small groups. They had some examples. They brought examples of rules and examples from filings of language and documents that passed those rules and failed. And so the first step was they built those rules into the AI. Then they fed them examples where they fed examples of language and documents, and they told the AI if the example was passing the rule or failing. And then that is training the rule. That's the kind of testing training piece. And then after a bit of doing that, they started feeding it examples from filings of documents where they didn't tell it if it passed or failed, and let the AI do that analysis and see. And then if the AI got it right, then it got it right. If it got it wrong, corrected it. And then that continues to go into the learning. I believe that almost all, if not all, of those small groups had at least one example where a rule was identified correctly by the AI. So it was a massive success. We were very happy with how it went and excited to move on to the next step, which is transitioning that proof of concept into a pilot program. Now, eventually, this AI solution will be integrated into the Modernized platform. But for right now, this pilot program is the solution is going to be a standalone application. So because it won't be integrated, that means there'll be a little bit more work on the hands of the reviewers, because you'll have to, export documents from SERFF, whether through PDF pipeline or just exporting documents one by one to either feed it examples in training, or when you're actually wanting to run those rules against filings to help with the review process. So there's a little bit more manual work because it won't be integrated yet, but because it'll be a standalone application, we won't be limited to just the regulators that are in the new platform being able to be part of the pilot program. So there's a possibility it can be kind of start to be utilized and tested and trained for even our regulators that will be in the legacy system for a bit. So to get a little bit more in detail on how this pilot will work, the first step is that you will create and test, train and test your rules. So you'll take a rule from your checklist, you'll build it, we won't build those rules in for you, you'll have to do that. And then you'll start training them. You'll then combine your rules into a rule set. And this is convenient because let's say you have the same rule on all of your PNC checklists. You only have to create that rule once, but you can then add that same rule into all of the rule sets, for each one of those rule sets for each one of those checklists. It also means that if there is a legislation change or a rule changes, you won't have to retrain your entire rule set. You'll just have to, retrain, redo and retrain the affected rules. Once you have those rules combined into rule sets, you'll then run the filing content against those targeted rule sets. So whichever, either filing type or TOI a particular checklist is for, then you'll start running that filing content against that the rule set for that checklist to start getting that AI assisted review for those running against those rules. Now, eventually, once the kind of the larger plan for this AI solution, once it's integrated into the Modernized platform, is that we would love to start shifting some of this validation left. And what we mean by that is, let's say you get a rule and you've been training it and you've been running against filing content and correcting if it needs to be corrected, and it's learning, and it starts, you get really confident in it. It starts being successful to a threshold where you're getting pretty confident. We want you to be able to then make the decision that you want to start making that rule or that rule set available to the filers when they're doing their draft filings. And this is where that pre-submission check comes back in, because the pre-submission check has two sections I talked about: the errors, which is they cannot submit the filing if there's an error, and the warning section, which is we're pretty sure that you've made a mistake, but the system will still allow you to submit it, but maybe take a second look. So we want you to have the flexibility where you're getting really confident in a rule. You maybe want to turn it on for the filers on the draft filing to run that rule when they run their pre-submission check, when they're getting ready to submit. And if it fails, maybe at first it just shows up as a warning. So they can still submit the filing, but they're getting that early feedback that they may be not compliant based on one of your existing rules. So you may have it as a warning for a while, but as you continue to review and continue to train the rule, you then get so confident with it that you want to switch that into an error. So now it's on the filer side, but now if it doesn't pass, it's an error and they can't submit the filing. And that's what we mean by shifting the validation left, to where the filers are getting that early feedback, and they're able to hopefully submitting more compliant filings. You're doing less of that work on when they're reviewing, less of those early objections and amendments going through. With AI, we know there are a lot of considerations, and so we have considerations here for the state and for the NAIC. For the states, you'll really want to make a decision on how you approach the AI in SERFF. So do you take a wide and shallow approach? So the example I gave, you have the same rule that applies to all of your PNC checklists. That would be, you only get one rule that applies to a bunch of different things, get that kind of knocked out of the way, wide and shallow. Or do you want to take the strategy where you get one complete checklist and you get all of the rules, created and trained, and you have that one checklist down. That'd be more of a narrow and deep scenario. So that is a consideration, and we can't make that consideration for you. You'll have to kind of determine in your departments what you would like your strategy to be. You also need to determine, who is going to be doing this work? Who's going to be building the rules? Who's going to be training them? Is it going to be the same person? When it comes to training the rules, who's going to do that training? You're probably not going to want your newest reviewer to be the one that does the training for these rules. So who does that training? How much time are they allocating for that? What does that mean for your workforce? And then you'll want to do the autonomy versus oversight. How much trust do you have in the AI solution? What is the confidence level for the that threshold where you're confident that it's determining correctly, that you don't need to double check it all the time? Where do you draw that line? And then based on kind of these other considerations, what are the impacts to your workforce and how do you handle those? For the NAIC, we are of course considerate and concerned about the security, privacy, legal concerns for the AI. One of the things we like to highlight is that the AI that we use is private AI. So that means that any of the material that's used to train these rules, build these rules, never leaves kind of the NAIC bubble parameters, for lack of a better word. So for example, the materials that we use to train this AI will never go to train ChatGPT. Private AI versus public AI. Also making sure that we're choosing the right technologies for the AI solutions and capabilities that we're bringing to you. And then we want to make sure that we're providing the right staffing. I mentioned that we won't be the ones to build your rules or train them. We don't know how to do that, but we'll need to have the staff that can help support you while you're doing that and has the knowledge and can help you do that. So making sure that we're considerate of that. And then helping to build some best practices to help guide you as you're kind of having all of those considerations. We also know that a lot of our states may be considering talking to or have already talked to vendors about AI solutions that they provide. I think maybe that's because you might be unaware of the progress that we've made with our own solutions. And our solutions are backed with the benefits of NAIC membership. So we just ask that if you're considering going down that path, please reach out to us first to discuss your AI needs, your timeline. We can talk about the solutions the progress that we've made and the solutions that we're bringing, kind of talk through the options there. All right, Bridget, is there anything else you want to mention on AI? I know this is your favorite topic.
It is a topic that I love. You did a great job, and hopefully we get some good questions in chat or in the Q&A section.
Awesome. Okay. All right, and this my last section here is outreach and communication. We know that the outreach and communication is critical for this project's success, but we also recognize that the more widespread outreach to the larger SERFF user base has been a little lacking recently. We've been a bit impeded by our focuses post that initial launch. The staff, the team of staff that I had mentioned, we've really been heads down working on making those usability improvements, providing that white glove support to our users that are currently in the new platform. But we feel like we're getting at a place now where we can kind of start picking our head up, really need to start increasing that more widespread communication to the larger user base, have a renewed focus there so that all of our users understand, what's coming, what our plan is, what they should be getting ready for, looking forward to. So look out for more of that renewed focus and that expanded outreach. We also have a project email we always like to make very visible for our users. SERFF modernization questions at naic.org may be the longest email address I've ever seen. But this is, if you have any questions about the project, if you have any feedback about the project, please don't hesitate to reach out to us. Another way that you can stay involved and stay updated on the project is the SERFF Product Steering Committee. This is a monthly call that is open for anybody. We always have updates on the project. We then will sometimes have a focus on a particular area, depending on if there is something we really want to talk about or that's been a request. And then we always have an engagement activity. We use a survey tool that allows us to receive input and feedback and questions from the large number of users. I think we're averaging over 200 attendees now on those PSC calls. So we have the tool that allows us to ask these questions and get feedback from everybody that wants to participate. So it's a really great way to, even if you are still in legacy, if you're maybe not going to be over the new platform for a while, you can still stay engaged, provide your input, and how you're using either you want to use the new platform or how you're currently using legacy that can help kind of drive some of the decisions. We also have a website for the SERFF Product Steering Committee that links from serff.com. That has historical meeting summaries if you want to know kind of what we've talked about in the past. And if you are not on the attendee email list for the SERFF Product Steering Committee, you can be added by either contacting your state liaison or sending an email to that same project email address, and we will get you added to the email list. And then my last slide here is a plug for NAIC Connect. NAIC Connect is a regulator-only platform from the NAIC, and we do have a SERFF modernization group that is live on NAIC Connect. In that group, we'll start having more information on upcoming SERFF events, regulator-facing documentation, and other announcements. It's also a great way to collaborate and network with your peers. So as we start getting more regulators into SERFF with those state filings, or some of our state regulators start using the AI pilot program, it's a way that you can collaborate, network, and start chatting about ways that you're using that. The URL for NAIC Connect is community.naic.org. If you already have an account on NAIC Connect, you can add the SERFF group from the active groups list. But if you are new to Connect and you need to set up an account, if you have any questions, again, contact your state liaison or this project email box, and we will get you set up. I think that is my last slide here. Thank you, everybody. And I think we can turn it to Q&A.
Yeah, we do have some questions in the chat, Lauren. So I'll tee those up for you and assist where you need me to. I would encourage people to go ahead and add your additional questions in the chat, or if you'd like to ask them or weigh in, please go ahead and use the raise hands function. I've got my eyes on who has a raised hand out there. So Lauren, going to the chat, we have a question about the change to the pivot. And can you just reiterate what the expected timeline is for the rest of the states?
Yeah, so we don't exactly know what the timeline will be for the rest of the states. I believe, Bridget, we're hoping to have a better idea by like Q1 of next year. Once we start getting the first couple of early adopter states into the new platform, we'll have a better idea of like how smooth, how quickly those rollouts are going, and we'll start having a better idea of the timeline for the rest of the early adopter states, which will help guide our long-term roadmap and the timeline for the other states.
That's right. And I'll just kind of tack on there, those early adopters definitely are states that are, change oriented and open to a little bit of experimentation and risk. And we will leverage those states to learn, and we'll get faster as we go. So where we might do, one early adopter state, and then maybe we'll do two together, and then, maybe we'll get three, and then the rest of them. Every state that we implement, our practices get better and smoother. We address challenges, and we know how to deal with those in the future. So I think by, mid to late Q1 2026, we'll have gotten a lot of information, a lot of learnings that will help us inform that future timeline. We think that there might be like a wave 2, so like the early-ish adopters, or sometimes it's called the early majority, or maybe there's another group of states. If you are a state that is motivated, that you really think that you want to move to the new platform on the early side, reach out to Lauren, myself, or your liaison so that we are aware. And then there are some states that kind of want to wait for things to mature and play out. Maybe you've got some other irons in the fire, and you want to just sit back for a little bit. That's fine too. You can let us know that. Ultimately, everyone will have to move. Like, we'll have to get everyone over to retire the old system, but we're just going to make sure that we get the states in a good spot and that they feel comfortable. Lauren, there's a question about the slides. Those will be available on the Insurance Summit event website. I think Renee said earlier that those will be available today or tomorrow. Let's see, what have we got here? This one, I think we might need a little bit of clarification on the question, so you may want to reach out to Lauren or I directly about how AI deals with the rules currently in the legacy system that may change as a result of the modernization project. Lauren, any off-the-cuff response on that?
No, I think I agree. We need a little bit of clarification there.
Yes. So Massachusetts policy form review, please either throw something else in the chat or feel free to reach out to us directly, because it sounds like that would be a good, interesting discussion. Lauren, Rashida in Maryland asked, she understands that we have to wait for the early adopters to become comfortable with the new SERFF system, but are there some features that can be staggered in if it appears that it could benefit other states? Do you want to maybe talk about our philosophy on enhancing legacy and how we plan to continue to grow and evolve the new platform?
Yeah, and Bridget, correct me if I'm wrong. I think we don't plan on making any significant enhancements to legacy. What we do plan on implementing features and enhancements gradually in the new platform, and that's again part of that early adopter process. It was taking all of the features and the capabilities that are in legacy SERFF today, and then what are used by some states versus not used by others, and kind of having a limited but solid base of features for that early adopter group, and then building in more features and functionality, not just to meet the needs kind of based on what's already in legacy, but also implementing better tools, enhancements as we're getting feedback from those early adopters that are in the new platform, that start using it and they start seeing how it all works and then have suggestions, so making those enhancements. So it'll definitely be an iterative process.
Yeah, thanks, Lauren. So another question, just if you wouldn't mind reiterating what happens with legacy filings once a state moves to the new platform.
Sure. So once a state moves, the filings that are moving as part of that migration for that state will become read-only in legacy. So they don't get deleted from legacy, they're still there, but as part of that migration, they become completely read-only. So no further changes or edits or updates are made to those filings. So you can still reference them. Like we know that maybe the first couple of days you're in the new platform, you want to kind of cross-check between the new platform and legacy to help learn, okay, this field is here in legacy and now it's here in the new platform, and not just double check that the data is all correct, but help kind of learn the new platform that way. But especially on those open filings, very quickly that data and legacy will get stale, because any further changes or updates made will only occur in the new platform, not in the legacy system.
Lauren, we have a question from one of our good friends at the Compact, Sue Azalarab, and she was asking about the export tool in legacy SERFF, but also when that'll be available in Appian. Can you just talk a little bit about, acknowledge we've had some struggles delivering some of the reporting that we want to deliver in the new platform, but can you talk about what we're doing particularly for regulators in that space?
Yeah, so there were a couple of tools with Appian that we thought we would be able to use for some customized reporting or data exporting that turns out working with Appian doesn't seem like it would be a good fit. At least right now, it's not going to meet our needs. And so we're kind of pivoting to other options. So we are going building in some more kind of that canned report functionality in SERFF to provide some of those needs. But then we also have the Tableau dashboards with some of those tools. And we can start working, I believe, Bridget, we can start working with states to try to help fill those gaps with some of that data as we're working on solutions in the Appian platform.
Yeah, absolutely. And that Snowflake solution and that data warehouse is a fantastic option. I have heard that Missouri says it is the chef's kiss of the enterprise data platform, that you can get your SERFF data there and you can mingle that with other data. So if you have not explored that capability, definitely reach out to us, because it's pretty great and it gives you some really nice options. Lauren, I'll take this next one so that you can, rest a little bit. Josh was asking about he refers to it as the IBM AI partnership. It's actually AWS, I think, Josh, that you're talking about, Amazon Web Services. And we did do a proof of concept with them. It was really helpful for us. They did a little bit of a proof of concept evaluating the Insurance Compact's life application checklist, and we involved the compact, so we got some good feedback. That has ended, and we're looking at the usability of that particular body of work for go forward. I think where it helped us the most is it validated that we're on the right track in the way that we're approaching it. So their approach was very consistent with what we thought. It helped us understand some tools, and it helped us understand some of the complexity around things that on the surface to a technical person might have seemed more straightforward. So it was a very informative proof of concept. It has closed down. At this time, we're just kind of like putting that on the back burner, because we feel like that proof of concept tool that the NAIC built, which uses AWS technologies, but we built that tool, we demoed that at the state workshop that Lauren referred to, and it went very well. So we're kind of moving forward a little bit in that space, still with both AWS as well as Appian and our engagement partner, PwC, all those people behind us and supporting us as we move forward. So hopefully that answers your question. Lauren Noor has a question about updates to SERFF access, and I think this might be about Okta, but we also had a question about SERFF filing access. So if you feel comfortable tackling, I might have to help on the Okta one because I've been knee deep in that, but do you want to talk about the portal build out, and then I'll kind of mention Okta?
Sure, yeah, so we're building out a kind of new version of SERFF filing access. It was you'll hear us refer to it as like the public portal that is kind of along with like kind of rebuilding the entirety of the SERFF application, building out that public portal there. And like with the SERFF platform, we started light with limited searching and exploring, kind of meeting kind of a basic need. But as we get more and more filings out there, we'll be looking at feedback to increase or enhance that feature as iteratively as well.
And I will speak to the Okta implementation. So when the new platform already uses Okta, which is the NAIC's single sign-on provider. And we decided to move the legacy application to that as well. That was something, legacy will be around, for, maybe another 2 years at least. And we want it to be secure. There's also some advantages that we can make the transition a little bit easier for those of you who have to use both platforms for a while. So the legacy system is now on Okta. When you go to log in, you will see like the regular login button, and then there's a one to the right of it that says like something like Okta login. Right now they both work, but we're only seeing about a 40% adoption of the Okta login, and we have got to get users moved over. So we'll be disabling that old login. So what we will probably be reaching out to the states in the next week or so with a list of your users who have not moved to the new login and ask you to help us get them over. So if they use iSight or SBS, it's the same credentials. So they'll have that and hopefully be an easy transition, but we just need to get people to move over. We have not set a drop dead date, but we are working toward having all SERFF users moved over and shutting down the legacy login before the end of the year. So we definitely need to get people moving because we still have a lot of users who are using the old login. So hopefully between those two, we addressed Nora's question. And Lauren, I don't see any questions that we've not addressed from the chat, and I don't see any hands raised. So I think you might be off the hook. You might be done.
All right.
Yep, and we are actually a few minutes over time, so we will go ahead and wrap things up. Great job, Lauren and Bridget. And Bridget, I didn't share your bio when I was starting the session, so it was a pleasure to have you join us here. But I know it is on the website if anyone wants to be able to read all of the great things that Bridget has been doing for us.
Thanks, Renee.
But anyway, there is another SERFF session tomorrow that's primarily for industry users, but if you would like to join and see what kind of things we show and share with them, we would love to have you. Have a great day. Thank you.